I have a bit of a different video today, actually quite different from the usual watercolor tutorials that I like to share with all of you. And that's that I did my first art market, my very first art market over the weekend where I sold some of my art. And so I thought, why don't I make a video and tell you kind of my first impressions about it, what I felt, the kind of tips and tricks that I might have. It's obviously the first time that I'll be a newbie. I've planned to do a few more, but it won't be my first time at that point, obviously. So I thought, why don't I make a little video and explain kind of my, gut reactions to the experience, and maybe it will help some of you. And you know what, even if you don't do an art market yourself, this is probably a video that could be useful if you've done anything kind of new in your career, and those kind of feelings and how you harbor through them when it's something that you've never done before in your experience. So the first thing I will say is that, and it might sound kind of obvious, but it's a completely different set of skills than being, painting in your studio at home. So I might be used to, or wherever your studio is, mine is at home. For me, it really those few hours selling, I had my own, stall and selling at a market, really reminded me that experience that day, I had to put a different hat on. I was no longer Jennifer the artist. Of course, I was to some extent Jennifer the artist, but mostly I was Jennifer the salesperson, Jennifer the CEO and owner of my business. And I had to put a lot of different kind of hats on, and you definitely are using those hats all the time when you're a business owner and selling your art and creating a business that way. But there is definitely something very different to all of a sudden being a person behind a counter, so to speak, and to be selling your art. And so, I thought that was an interesting point to bring up to start us off, because it really forced me for those few hours to kind of remind myself of that and of how many different roles you have to take on when you're a business owner. And sometimes you might forget it, and maybe I'm just taking a tiny bit of a moment to be proud of myself, but it's just because there's so many different facets that you have to take into account when you own your own business. And definitely once you've created the art and you're putting it, setting it up wherever that may be and selling it to other people, then you're taking on kind of the roles of a salesperson, even though I don't really like that word. But you're a salesperson, you're a marketing person, you're a stylist to some extent because you're styling your table for the day. So there's a lot of different skills that are involved that, maybe not the skills that you might think of first and foremost when you think of yourself as an artist. So I think that's the first thing I'd like to say. Let's see. The second thing I'd like to say, which I thought was kind of interesting, and might also work in other contexts than an art market, but is that those pieces that you might love the most when you're an artist, those illustrations or those paintings that are your very favorite, that you are so incredibly proud of, might not be the ones that sell the most. And that's okay. You just have to be okay with it. But I think being in front of an audience, a set of potential customers that are looking at your art, it really makes that clear that maybe those pieces that you are most fond of or most proud of might not actually be the ones that sell the most, and vice versa. Pieces that you might think, needed more work or aren't your favorite actually sell really well. And that's just because obviously art is subjective and people have their own tastes, and it's just interesting. So obviously everything that I make is something that I like and feel close to, but there's always favorites. So I thought that was an interesting part to kind of see that in real life. I think the other thing I will say, and I come at this from a personality standpoint, and that is that I consider myself to be an extroverted introvert, or maybe an introverted extrovert, whatever the right way to say that is. And I've found that being in a market setting where you have to really be on for a number of hours can be quite tiring if you're not a completely extroverted type. And although I wouldn't say that I'm completely introverted, 100% introverted anyways, I will say that there were moments that I did find quite tiring as the hours kind of went on. And what I found really helped kind of ground me and keep me going was to have something else to focus on in kind of the downtime. So I guess it depends what kind of market you're doing. Some markets might be full on busy for the entirety of the time that you're there. But in my case, there were definitely ebbs and flows and, peaks and valleys. And so some moments were very busy, then there were lulls, and it went back up and down. And so when it was a little bit calmer, I allowed myself to kind of take a breather and do something else as opposed to just selling. And so what I did is I have these little tags that I put on my greeting cards that I handwrite and that do take a little bit of time to do, but it's a bit mindless in the sense that I know exactly what I'm doing, what I'm writing, how, what the design looks like. And so I bought a little stack of those, and in the downtime, I kind of sat down with my, pretty pens and made those tags. And so not only was it useful because I do use them in a lot of my products, but also it kind of grounded me, brought me, another activity in that time, and also just kind of took my mind away from maybe looking around at the people, at the other, at the business of the market and what else was going on. And I found that, then when a customer is kind of coming to my stall and I had to deal with that interaction again, then I was kind of rejuvenated in a way. So I think finding something, whatever it may be, if it's not tags, it can be something else, but just an activity that might be, a sideline to your art business. Depending on the medium that you use, it might be having your palette and your sketchbook, whatever it is, something that you can kind of turn to in those down moments really helped me kind of navigate the long day. The next thing I will say is to stay true to yourself. And that might sound corny, but honestly, I thought about that sentence time and time again as the day went on, and to sort of make that experience your own. And in essence, you're kind of creating your own store within the setting of whatever market you're in. And it really should reflect your personality and who you are as an artist. And this is just anecdotal, of course, but I was next to somebody who was giving out, freebies in what they were selling and who was very loud. And it's just, that is not who I am, and that's okay. And it's not good or bad. Everyone has their different way of being, and I think just staying true to who you are, creating an experience that's true to the person that you are, really does come through when you have your little stall. And if you don't do that, you're not going to feel great about it anyways. So I think I just took the approach, I'm not going to be the kind of person who calls people to my store, who says, come on over, and stops people in conversation. I'm more the type that might be friendly once someone comes over, happy to answer any questions, happy to share if I see that interaction is genuine, and that's okay. I just have to stay true to who I am, and I think that's the only way to kind of create an experience that people might remember and feel like is genuine and authentic. The next thing that I thought I should bring to your attention, which you probably know, especially if you've ever done a market, is that you should expect a lot of schlepping. And I was kind of prepared for that. I think I might have mentioned in some other videos that I've done a lot of food styling and prop styling in my day. That's part of sort of my original career. And for those who don't know, food styling is kind of making food look beautiful, to being, for it to be shot on camera or portrayed in any way for, media. And prop styling is the same thing, kind of making a space look beautiful and appealing for whatever kind of media is happening, whether it be a video shoot or a photo shoot, what have you. And a lot of those things require a lot of schlepping, which means it requires a lot of thought ahead of time, having a lot of different props and bits and pieces and things that you might need to bring to make your stand look good. So that requires a lot of carrying, a lot of thinking ahead. A good tip that I have, and that's from sort of my prop and food styling days, is to kind of prop your table at home, set it up the way you like it, put all of your products, and take a photo of it once you're happy with what it looks like, so that on the day of, when you set up your table and you have all of your bits and pieces to kind of arrange, you're not starting from scratch. You have a photo to go by, and you might make a little changes here and there, but just having that photo to go by is incredibly helpful, because at least you can put the big pieces, the kind of foundational pieces down, and that it will look good because you've tried it out at home and that you like the way it looked. So that's kind of a tip on that front. But there was a lot of schlepping, a lot of carrying, and even if you do sell a lot of products, you're still taking back all the boxes and maybe shelves and display items and all of those things that you've brought with you. There's probably a lot of boxes involved if you have anything fragile at all and you need to protect them. Obviously your table, a tablecloth, a chair, there's just a lot of schlepping involved, a lot of carrying, a lot of schlepping, and there's a lot of work behind the scenes to make something look beautiful in the way you want it to look. That's definitely something that I was kind of expecting, but I thought I would bring up because you might not think of it as something that's involved in a market day, but 100% is, I would say, at least half of the game. And then I guess on that note, I just reminded myself, and as I said, I've done a lot of food styling and prop styling in my day, so this was something that I was familiar with, but I thought I would bring it up to someone who might be new to that kind of arena, that kind of style of work, is that height is really your friend. And so you might not think of it, maybe if, for example, I sell a lot of greeting cards, which are flat, but you really have to think about height. And that is really what will bring people to your stand, what will make your table look appealing, have different heights. That's also something, not just one height. So that might mean having a big display case of some sort, depending on what you're showcasing. That might mean having different boxes that you can put your displays on so that some things are higher, some things are less high. And it kind of helps the eye travel through the table. In essence, you're creating a mini store just from a little table that you set up. And so having those different heights is really key to the visual experience. So for example, for my, I sell stickers as well. And so for my setup, I actually made a lot of gift boxes. So I wrapped them really beautifully and had different boxes of different heights and different shapes and different sizes, so that kind of helped your eye travel through the space. And I think that was something that I remembered was incredibly important. And I think I'll do even more of it the next time I do a market. And I think the last thing that I will say is to not set too many expectations on that first kind of market. Things might not go exactly according to plan. I have a few examples for myself where things did not go exactly according to plan. There might be some happy surprises, some things that you might not might not have expected. But for that first market, just concentrate on trying to have a good time if you can and taking it all in. There's no need to have a range of statistics that you're running for that first day. A lot of things you might be seeing might be anecdotal. You won't really know until you do your second, your third, and your fourth market. And don't put too much pressure on yourself. You've already done the big thing, which is to book yourself into a market and to, basically put yourself on display and be there with all of your items. And so I think that's really, don't set your expectations too high. Don't really expect anything, because you'll probably get some really good insight along the way no matter what, but don't really expect to be selling X of this amount and X of that amount. Count it as a discovery space, as a moment to be in your phase of discovery where you'll see what happens and, use the second, third, fourth market that you do to really delve into those things, but let that first market kind of free yourself of all of those of all of those things. So I think those are pretty much all of my findings. I will say I was quite tired after the market, just because, first of all, I'm not someone who likes to not move. I'm someone who usually, even when I'm working at my desk and creating art, usually I do like to kind of get up every, hour or so, go for a walk, even if it's just, getting a cup of coffee, what have you. And you might not be able to do that in a busy market setting. And so I that was something that I, hadn't necessarily thought of, but that did kind of come up. And then also, I guess I should add maybe like a little bonus tip is that what you think might be scary might not be the actual thing that is scary, and vice versa. And I think that goes for a lot of things in life. Sometimes when you're anticipating something, a new experience, you might think, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to do X, Y, Z. And then that turns out to work, swimmingly. But then another thing that you might not have thought about ends up being a little complex. And so for me, I was never really worried about talking to people. I wasn't. However, I will say for me, what was a little bit of the ick was the tech aspect. That was because I'm not necessarily that, tech oriented. And so for me, the tech aspects of payment and all of those things was what was actually kind of keeping me up at night the days before. What if something goes wrong? What if my machinery doesn't work, etc. Whereas the talking to people, I actually found that quite natural and quite lovely. Oh, and actually, you know what? Now that I am talking to you, I will add something. What is extremely bizarre, and you might not have had that experience if you haven't done a market before, is that when you're an artist and you sell your work maybe on commission, or maybe you sell in a store, you might get feedback here and there. People say like, oh, I really like this one. Please do this kind of work. I like these aspects of your work. Obviously, you'll get feedback along the way. But what's really kind of almost bizarre when you're in a market, and it would be the same if you owned your own store, for example, is that you're getting kind of a lot of real moment feedback on your work in real time. And so it might, no one said something horrible about my work, of course. Well, maybe not, of course, but luckily. However, you do hear people saying things, and they're not even maybe thinking that you're hearing them. But for example, there are moments where there are quite a few different people looking at things in my stand, and obviously I can still hear what's going on. And people are kind of lost in conversation with their friends or family looking at your items, and you'll just hear a lot of feedback. Like, oh, I really like this one. Oh, this one, I don't know. Like, little things like that, or maybe more details. But anyways, it is a bit of an interesting experience to be hearing direct feedback upon your work while you're right there kind of taking it all in. So maybe just be prepared for that. And obviously, you know, people are going to like what they like, and it doesn't reflect on you as an artist. And so as long as you stay true to yourself, at least that's what I've been telling myself, as long as you stay true to yourself, to your skill set, to what you enjoy making, and make something that's the best of your ability and the best of your aesthetic, then that's all you can do. But it is kind of an interesting experience to be there, kind of listening to people kind of critique your work and saying their, you know, their gut feeling, their gut reaction about your work. And even if it's something very positive, it can be strange to receive it that way. Somehow it's different from getting a message on, say, Instagram, or even here on YouTube of someone saying, oh, beautiful work. It's kind of different to hear someone in person kind of say that about your work. At least I had never had that experience quite in that way, and I thought I would point that out. So I think that's it. I had a really nice day. I think I'll do it again. As I said, it was tiring, but I do think I learned a lot, and it kind of really set my business into kind of another arena. So that's it. So if you're thinking of running a market, or if you have run a market, I would love for you to put any comment down below about experiences that you've had, so we can add to the conversation. And that's it. That's it for the video for today.